But the gilded life masked a very different one in private. A shadow loomed, cast by the prince's relationship.
Wants to allow, quote, her son and the entire royal family to draw a line under the case that had threatened to overshadow her.
Queen really did have to make a decision. Andrew will no longer be addressed as His Royal Highness, and what's more is that he won't be present.
Andrew's about to break his silence. After years of staying quiet, he's ready to talk. And Meghan, she's reportedly panicking. Here's why that matters. When Andrew's world came crashing down because of his controversial connections, the whole planet watched. His titles got stripped, his reputation shattered, his future wiped clean. But here's what nobody talks about. Meghan was in those same spaces. Same social world, same timeline, same exclusive circles. Yet when Andrew fell, there was complete silence around her name. No questions asked, no headlines written, like it never happened. One royal gets torn apart, the other walks away untouched. That's not random. That's deliberate protection. And when you dig into why she needed that protection, this gets way darker than you'd think. Because what if I told you Harry wasn't even her first target? What if there's a whole hidden chapter between Meghan and Andrew that the palace buried on purpose? Stick around. This story's not what you think. Before we go any further, you need to know this gets intense. Like, way more intense than you're expecting. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and drop a like, because what I'm about to show you flips everything. Turn on notifications too, because when the next revelation hits, you'll want to be here first. Trust me on this one. All right, let's dive in. All right, here's where things start getting strange. Before Harry, before the wedding, before Meghan became a household name,
there's always been a strange parallel between Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, and Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex.
There was something nobody talks about, a connection, a close one, between Meghan and Prince Andrew. Now, I know what you're thinking. How's that even possible? Meghan was in Hollywood doing Suits. Andrew was in the UK doing royal duties. How do those worlds even overlap? But here's the thing, they did overlap. And not just a little bit. According to people who were around back then, Andrew reportedly told friends he knew Meghan way before she ever became a duchess, like years before Harry was even in the picture. And we're not talking about some casual acquaintance here. Not like a quick handshake at some charity gala. Not a nice to meet you moment that gets forgotten 5 minutes later. We're talking about them actually running in the same circles, the same exclusive spaces where most people never get access, the same elite social world that operates completely differently from what regular folks see. And get this, when Meghan walked into the royal family, she wasn't some complete outsider learning the ropes from scratch.
The last week, breaking news and allegations about Prince Andrew are flooding the media.
She had access to that world before Harry appeared. She understood how those circles worked. She'd been around that environment previously. Think about that for a second. While everyone was watching her adjust to royal life, acting like everything was brand new, she'd reportedly been moving through similar spaces for years. She knew the game. She understood the players. She wasn't learning from scratch. She was familiar with it all. So the question becomes pretty obvious, right? How did they cross paths in the first place? When did this connection actually start? Was it mutual friends, social events, that whole elite network connecting wealth and power? And here's the bigger question. Why has nobody ever explained it? Why is there zero public record of how Meghan and Andrew knew each other before Harry? You'd think if a future duchess had direct ties to a prince before meeting her husband, that'd be mentioned somewhere. In an interview, an article, a biography, but it's not. It's like someone went through and scrubbed that information clean.
There is absolutely zero doubt in my mind. Rachel Meghan Markle was a semi-expensive yacht girl, and she knows it.
There's no timeline. Zero explanation. Not even an acknowledgement that it happened. Just complete silence. And that silence is loud. Because when you bury something this deliberately, you're clearly trying to keep people from asking questions. There's something worth hiding. The fact that this connection stayed buried for this long, even after everything that happened with Andrew, even after his entire world collapsed, it It's not coincidence. It's not overlooked information. It's deliberate. Someone made sure this chapter stayed locked away. And now you've got to wonder, what exactly happened between them that required this much silence? Now let's talk about 2014, because this is where the visuals start connecting the dots. Photos surfaced that year showing Meghan on a private yacht, not a commercial cruise, no weekend getaway you book online, a private yacht, the kind that doesn't show up in your average person's Instagram feed. It's part of a very specific lifestyle, an elite lifestyle connected to some pretty controversial figures. And here's where it gets interesting. There's this woman named
engulfing the royal family and threatening the firm itself.
This is the most dangerous point for the monarchy.
Karina Shuliak. She was connected to that whole world we're talking about, the one tied to powerful people, private jets, exclusive access. And Karina publicly stated something that matters here. She said the only times she flew private or went yachting were during that specific period, during those years when she was moving through those circles. So when you see Meghan on a yacht in 2014, you're not just looking at a vacation photo. You're looking at someone who's in those same spaces. That exclusive inner scene operating on a completely different level from what most people experience. This wasn't some public event. Nobody could just book this. It was private, exclusive, the kind of environment where access is everything and not everyone gets invited. And the thing is, when you start connecting this to Meghan's history with Andrew, the timeline starts looking really messy because we're talking about overlapping periods, similar social worlds, spaces where powerful people gather away from public eyes.
There are moments in life when silence says more than words ever could. Because while the world looked away, Meghan is reportedly preparing.
Listen, coincidences happen. People cross paths randomly all the time. But this doesn't feel random. This feels like proximity, like being in certain rooms at certain times with certain people. And proximity matters, especially when you're talking about a world that later exploded into one of the biggest scandals in recent history. You can't just brush past the fact that Meghan was photographed in these environments during the exact years that other people in those circles were doing things that would later destroy their reputations. So you've got to ask yourself, was she just accidentally there? Maybe coincidental timing, or was she actively part of that scene? Because being on a private yacht in 2014 connected to the elite lifestyle that Karina described, while also having ties to Andrew during that time frame, that's not three separate stories. That's one story with three different angles. And the more you look at it, the clearer it becomes.
Dukes of York are ripe for scandal.
There are always going to be pitfalls, of course.
Meghan wasn't standing outside looking in. She was right there in the middle of it. In the right rooms, sure, but maybe at the wrong time. So Andrew's world fell apart, like completely collapsed. And when that happened, people started asking questions, not just about him, but about who else was around during those years, who was in those spaces, who was at those events, who might have seen things. Because when something this massive goes down, it's never just about one person. There's always a wider circle, always more people connected to the story than what gets reported. And here's what's wild. Meghan's name came up, but not in the press or headlines. Behind closed doors, though, different story. In private conversations among people who knew what was happening back then, her name kept surfacing. People started wondering, what did she know? What had she seen during that time? Was she around when things were going down in those circles? Because if she was moving through the same spaces as Andrew, if they actually knew each other like the claim suggests, then she would have been nearby for at least part of it, right? These weren't random folks speculating. These were individuals who understood how that world worked, who knew the connections. And they were raising real questions about what Meghan's involvement actually was, not pointing fingers at her, just wondering why her proximity to all of this was never addressed, why nobody ever asked her directly about her time in those spaces during those years. But then something strange happened. When everything became international news, when Andrew's situation hit globally, Meghan's name just vanished, completely disappeared from every discussion about it. One minute, conversations were happening behind the scenes about her connection. The next minute, silence, like someone hit delete on that entire chapter of her history. Zero follow-up. Reporters stopped digging. The palace said nothing. Total blackout. And that's what doesn't make sense. If there was truly nothing there, if she genuinely had zero involvement or knowledge about any of it,
are removed. And let me just tell you something, sunshine. That's gonna happen. So you better get your lawyer.
why erase it so completely? Why not just say Meghan knew Andrew socially years ago but had no knowledge of anything problematic? That would have shut down the whispers immediately. But instead, total silence. They chose to remove that connection from the narrative entirely. And when you actively remove something instead of just explaining it away, that's revealing. There's more to the story than what we're getting. Someone decided those questions were too risky to let people keep asking. Let's rewind a bit, because to understand how Meghan ended up in these circles, you've got to go back to Toronto, back when she was filming Suits. At that point, she wasn't a household name, not globally famous, not getting invited to royal events or elite gatherings. She was a working actress with ambition, sure, but without the access that comes with real power and connections. That world, it wasn't open to her yet. But something changed when she got to Toronto, and it changed fast.
After 3 long years of hiding their children's faces like royal state secrets, Meghan Markle just did the
Enter Marcus Anderson. This guy's connected to Soho House, which, if you don't know, is one of the most exclusive private networks on the planet. We're talking members-only clubs where celebrities, billionaires, and power players gather. Places where you can't even get past the door without serious connections. It's not about money, it's about who you know and who vouches for you. And Marcus, he was a senior figure in that entire operation. Now here's the thing, Marcus didn't just casually meet Meghan and exchange numbers. According to what people say, he actively brought her into those spaces. He introduced her to the highest levels of Toronto society, the elite crowd that operates behind closed doors. He opened pathways that take others their entire lives to access without ever getting close. Through him, she reportedly connected with people like Jessica Mulroney, who was plugged into serious wealth and influence. And it didn't stop in Toronto. The connections expanded, New York circles, wealth, power, access to rooms where decisions get made and deals get done.
Meghan Markle may want to pay close attention to Sarah Ferguson's latest controversy. If there's one thing
This wasn't random networking, not just bumping into the right people at the right party. This was strategic, calculated, someone with connections deciding to bring her into that world and position her at the center of it. And it worked. By the time Harry's name ever came into her story, Meghan had stepped into spaces that rarely open to outsiders. She'd been moving through elite environments for years. Her path was crossing into Andrew's world long before Harry showed up. So when people act surprised that Meghan knew how to navigate royal life, when they wonder how she adapted so quickly to that level of wealth and status, maybe the answer's simpler than it looks. She wasn't learning from scratch. She'd been there before, in similar rooms, around similar people, playing the same game. Harry didn't introduce her to that lifestyle. She was living a version of it before they met. And the person who gave her that access, Marcus Anderson. What made him decide to bring her into that world?
Facing scrutiny.
As the second son, Andrew spent his childhood and, of course, his adult.
And who else was paying attention when he did? All right, here's where this story takes a wild turn. Because Harry, he wasn't the original plan, not even close. According to what people say, Meghan was actually focusing on Andrew first, not Harry. Andrew. And we're not talking about casual friendship or networking here. We're talking about targeting him specifically as her pathway into the royal family, her route to status, her access to the monarchy, a calculated move to position herself where power and titles live. Think about it. Andrew was older, established, deep inside the palace structure. He had direct access to everything royal. If you wanted a fast track into that world, Andrew made sense from a strategic standpoint. As a distant royal, no. He was connected to the center of it all. And according to the claims, that's exactly what Meghan was aiming for. She saw the target. She went after it. But there was a problem, a big one: Sarah Ferguson.
Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. Two names you would hardly expect to hear in the same sentence, but that's exactly where this story begins.
Fergie wasn't just Andrew's ex-wife. She remained deeply connected to him, protective of his world, watching who got close and why. And when Meghan started moving toward Andrew, Fergie saw it coming. She wasn't letting it happen. According to what's been said, Fergie shut that pathway down completely, blocked Meghan from getting into Andrew's network. That door closed before Meghan could get through it. So now what? The plan just failed. The route to royal access through Andrew, gone. But here's the thing about strategic people. They don't just give up when one door closes. They look for another one, and that's exactly what happened. Harry appeared. Young, popular, positioned directly in the royal spotlight. Not the original target, but maybe an even better one. Because Harry was sympathetic, emotional, vulnerable in ways Andrew never was. Grieving his mother, angry at the press, looking for someone who understood him. Someone who felt like an outsider too.
Well, Meghan's upset plenty of people and possibly embarrassed Prince Harry.
And Meghan pivoted. Fast. She shifted her focus from Andrew to Harry without missing a beat. This wasn't fate, not some magical love story where two souls found each other by chance. This was opportunity. And when opportunity knocked, she answered. She didn't expect to end up with Harry, but when the chance appeared, she took it, adapted, repositioned. And suddenly, the goal shifted from trying to get close to the royal family to marrying into its heart. Harry thought he'd found freedom, real freedom. When he married Meghan, he believed he was finally escaping the palace machinery, the control, the judgment, the coldness of royal life that suffocated him his entire childhood. Starting fresh with someone who got it, someone who understood what it felt like to be trapped in a system that didn't care about you as a person, someone who'd stand with him against the world, against the institution, against everything that made him feel like he couldn't breathe. For the first time in his life.
Issues. She can't afford to retire, can she, and see out her days in leisure. Is there still a chance?
He felt like he was making his own choice, not following protocol, not doing what was expected, not playing the role he was born into. This was his decision, his wife, his future, and nobody was going to take that from him. But things started changing, slowly at first. Whispers began reaching him, old stories, hidden connections, people mentioning things about Meghan's past, things about her history with Andrew, names he didn't expect to hear, timelines that didn't quite add up, connections that made him pause and wonder if there was more he didn't know. And at first, he didn't want to believe any of it, pushed back hard, defended her against anyone who questioned it, cut off family members who tried bringing it up. To him, it looked like jealousy, like control, like the palace trying to drag him back into their world and ruin the one good thing he had.
Destined to serve the crown. But the gilded life masked a very different one.
So he chose her over his brother, who he'd been close to his entire life, over his father, despite everything they'd been through, over everyone who raised concerns and tried getting through to him. Because in his mind, they were the problem. The ones who didn't understand what he needed, trying to control his life like they always had, like they controlled everything. So he doubled down, moved to California, put an entire ocean between himself and everyone who tried to warn him, built a life far away from the people who knew him best and cared about him most. Distance would bring clarity, or so he thought. Getting away from the palace would make everything better. Starting over in a place where nobody knew royal protocol or cared about titles would give him the peace he'd been searching for. But it didn't work out that way. Something shifted. According to people close to the situation, Harry eventually started seeing things differently. The whispers didn't stop just because he left. They kept coming. More details, more connections, more pieces that painted a picture he didn't want to see.
Outside world always seems to have one person who shakes things up, a disruptor who refuses to quietly blend into...
And at some point, it became too much to ignore. The stories weren't coming from tabloids or random folks with agendas trying to tear him down. These came from individuals who'd been there, who knew what happened back then, who had no reason to lie to him and nothing to gain from it. And that's when it hit him, really hit him. The family wasn't trying to control him, weren't jealous of his happiness, trying to protect him, trying to warn him before it was too late, before he walked away from everything and everyone for something that wasn't what it seemed. But he didn't listen, shut them out completely, burned those bridges, made it clear he was done with all of them, and now stuck. According to the claims, Harry's struggling, really struggling, distant, dealing with the realization that what he fought for might have been built on something he never fully understood. Thousands of miles from home now, separated from the people who actually cared about him beyond what he could offer them, and realizing he wasn't the first choice, the backup plan, the alternative route when the first one didn't work out.
You know, she will be planning as a Becky Sharp type figure what her next move is. They lose their titles, they are no longer...
The second option when door number 1 got shut. That's a hard thing to accept. Not being chosen for who you are as a person, being chosen for what you could provide. Access, status, a title, a pathway into the royal world that someone couldn't get through any other way. And now Harry's sitting with that reality, watching what he gave up, what he walked away from, his family, his country, his role, his purpose, and questioning whether any of it was real, whether the love was genuine, or whether he was just useful, whether he made the biggest mistake of his life because he was too hurt and too angry to see what was right in front of him. You'd think the media would have gone absolutely crazy over this, right? Meghan's history with Andrew, her presence in those spaces during the same years, everything was happening. The yacht photos, the connections, the timeline that puts her right in the middle of a world that later exploded into international scandal.
One of the interesting parts of your book, the many, many interesting parts of your book, was that there's a suggestion that Andrew might be bisexual. Is that right?
You'd expect headlines everywhere, front page stories, investigative pieces running for weeks, journalists digging into every detail trying to find the next big break, press conferences with uncomfortable questions that nobody wants to answer, the whole media circus that usually shows up when there's even a hint of royal scandal, especially one this juicy. The British press doesn't exactly hold back when it comes to the royals. We've seen them tear apart every mistake, every misstep, every controversial moment for decades. They went after Diana, they went after Camilla, they went after Meghan for things way smaller than this. So when you've got a story connecting a future duchess to a disgraced prince with ties to one of the biggest scandals in modern history, you'd think that would be front page news for months. But none of that happened. Instead, complete silence, like someone flipped a switch and the entire press just stopped asking questions. Major outlets ignored this story.
There's so much in this, and I did that show on JK Live over a year ago now when I spoke to Ghislaine Maxwell in prison.
Journalists avoided pushing for answers. Headlines never connected the dots between Meghan and Andrew's past. It's like the story just didn't exist, like it got wiped from everyone's radar simultaneously. And that kind of coordinated silence across multiple news organizations doesn't happen by accident. It's deliberate, controlled, the kind of thing that only happens when powerful people make it very clear certain topics are off limits. So why the silence? What was the palace so afraid of that they'd go to these lengths? According to what people say, they had 3 massive problems on their hands. 3 reasons they couldn't let this story blow up publicly, each one serious enough on its own, but together. They created a situation where silence became the only option. First problem, Harry's mental state. If the truth came out while Harry was still processing it...
Headline, the latest headline has the Kardashians deleting photos.
While he was still dealing with the shock of what he'd learned, he could have broken down completely. And not privately, in some therapy session, publicly, in front of cameras, in front of the entire world watching his every move. The palace didn't want a prince falling apart on television. They didn't want Harry's emotional collapse becoming the biggest story of the year. That would have been devastating for him personally and catastrophic for them as an institution. Remember, Harry's already struggled with mental health publicly. He's talked about his issues, his trauma from losing his mother, his battles with the press. Adding this on top of everything else could have pushed him over the edge in a very public, very messy way. Second problem, another massive scandal that would dwarf the first one. Andrew's situation almost destroyed the monarchy's reputation. The public trust took a huge hit. People questioned whether the royal family even deserved to exist anymore. The family spent years trying to rebuild credibility after that.
Has been far too lenient with him. And that it's not just now this sex case, but also
trying to convince the public they still mattered, that they still represented something worth preserving. And now imagine if it came out that Meghan had ties to that same world, been in those spaces during those years, knew Andrew before Harry even entered the picture, been photographed on yachts connected to the same controversial circles that brought Andrew down. That would have been a second explosion, bigger than the first one, more damaging, more destructive, because this time it wouldn't just be about one disgraced prince who everyone already knew had problems. It would be about the woman who married into the heart of the family, the woman millions of people around the world watched walk down that aisle at Windsor Castle, the woman who was supposed to represent a fresh start for the monarchy, a modern, progressive future, the woman they defended and protected through so much controversy already. If it came out she had this hidden history, that defense would crumble.
You know, she will be planning as a Becky Sharp type figure what her next move is. They lose their titles,
Every statement they'd made supporting her would look naive or dishonest. The whole narrative would flip overnight. Third problem, looking careless and incompetent. If the public found out Meghan had this history with Andrew and the palace, let her marry Harry anyway without addressing it, without even acknowledging it, the questions would have been brutal and relentless. Did they not vet her properly before allowing this marriage? Did they ignore massive red flags that should have been obvious? Did they know about her past and just not care enough to protect Harry? The monarchy would have looked incompetent at best, dangerously reckless at worst. Like they didn't take their own family's safety seriously. Like they'd let someone potentially problematic walk straight into the center of royal life without doing basic background checks. For an institution that's supposed to be all about tradition, protocol, and careful management of its image, that would have been humiliating. So instead of dealing with any of that, they made a choice. They buried it.
Lifestyle became a byword for excess until it all imploded. The Epstein connection, the disastrous BBC interview.
Decided to protect her, not because she's innocent, not because there's nothing there, but because exposing what's there could burn down the entire monarchy in one massive fire. They chose institutional survival over transparency, silence over accountability, reputation over honesty, and it worked. The press stayed quiet. The story never broke publicly. Meghan's connection to Andrew stayed hidden from the mainstream narrative, and for a while it seemed like the plan was working perfectly, like they'd successfully contained something that could have exploded in their faces. But here's where it all falls apart. Here's where the silence becomes impossible to maintain. Andrew's furious, absolutely furious. And can you blame him? Look at what he lost versus what she kept. Everything got stripped away from him. Titles gone.
Was it a metaphor, a jab at Meghan's ambition, or was she hinting at something literal? Something far darker than playful shade.
Reputation destroyed globally. Future completely erased. His place in the family vanished. While Meghan walked away clean, the fairy tale wedding broadcast to billions. Global fame and influence. Protection of the palace when she needed it. Everything he lost, she somehow gained. And he's sitting there watching it all happen. She was in the same world he was. She had connections to the same circles. Her name should have come up just like his did. And she didn't face a single question. Zero consequences. While he became the most hated man in Britain, maybe in the world, that's not something you just get over. That's not something you forgive and forget. That's the kind of injustice that eats at you every single day. And according to the claims, Andrew's done staying quiet, done protecting the people who didn't protect him, ready to talk, ready to leak everything he knows about Meghan's past, about her connection to him, about what she knew and when she knew it, about the timeline they've worked so hard to keep hidden. And here's the thing that makes this so dangerous. He's got nothing left to protect anymore.
I am here for it. I am here for it because, you know, Meghan thinks that she can go through life spiting everybody.
His reputation already destroyed. His titles already gone. His royal future already finished. He's already hit rock bottom, which makes him the most dangerous kind of person because someone with nothing to lose doesn't keep secrets anymore, doesn't protect the people who threw him under the bus, doesn't stay silent while someone else gets away with everything he got destroyed for. And he's not alone in this. Sources say Sarah Ferguson is right there with him. Fergie's aligned with Andrew on this. She remembers blocking Meghan all those years ago. She knows what was happening back then, and together they're holding information that could detonate everything. So here's where we're at. After everything we've talked about, all the connections, all the buried history, all the silence, it comes down to one thing. There's something sitting in the shadows. Something about Meghan's history with Andrew. Something about those years nobody discusses publicly. Something about what happened before Harry.
Make a substantial donation to Miss Giuffre's charity in support of victims' rights. In a letter to New York,
Before the wedding, before any of this became the fairy tale the world watched. And that information, it's not gone. Just waiting. Andrew knows it. He lived it. Was there for all of it. Fergie knows it too. She saw it happening in real time. Blocked it from going further. And according to sources, even Eugenie knows parts of the puzzle. This isn't one person's story anymore. Multiple people holding pieces of the same history, connected insiders who were actually present during the years everyone's been trying to forget. This connects to everything we've covered. Meghan's history with Andrew before Harry existed in her world. Those controversial years when she was moving through spaces most people never access. The yacht photos from 2014, the elite circles she entered through Marcus Anderson and Soho House, the strategic positioning that put her in Andrew's orbit first, the pivot to Harry when that door closed. All of it links to something the palace decided was too dangerous to let the public see.
What if Meghan Markle's real royal scandal isn't what she said, but what she desperately tried to hide at 60?
For years, the palace kept it buried. They made a calculated decision that exposing Meghan could damage the entire monarchy. They chose silence over transparency because the risk was too high. Harry's mental state couldn't handle it publicly. Another scandal would have destroyed what was left of royal credibility. And admitting they'd let someone with this history marry into the family would have made them look incompetent. So they built a wall around the story, made sure the press stayed quiet, erased her connection to Andrew from every public narrative, and it worked until now. Because Andrew's furious, and fury doesn't just disappear. Watching Meghan live the life he lost, the fame, the influence, the protection, while he sits alone with nothing, titles gone, reputation destroyed, future erased, and she was in the same world he was. Her name should have come up just like his did. She walked away clean while he took the fall alone.
Having to surrender his title because of his behavior.
But it's not enough to stem the flow of more.
That builds over time. That kind of resentment doesn't fade. It creates situations where someone decides they're done protecting people who never protected them. And here's what makes this so dangerous. Andrew's got nothing left to lose. When you're already at rock bottom, staying silent serves no purpose. His reputation, already destroyed. His future, already finished. His relationship with the family, already gone. Just the satisfaction of finally speaking out after years of carrying it alone remains. And he's not the only one ready to talk. Fergie's aligned with him. She remembers what happened, knows what she blocked all those years ago. Together, they're holding information that could detonate everything the palace has worked to keep hidden. If Andrew speaks, if he finally breaks his silence and tells what he knows, Meghan doesn't just lose her carefully crafted public image. Everything crumbles. The royal identity she fought so hard to build.
And I've been called by, there's a legal channel here that just plays courtroom.
The influence she gained through Harry, the protection the palace gave her, all of it falls apart the moment Andrew starts talking, because once it's out there, you can't put it back. Once people know about her history with Andrew, about her presence in those controversial circles, about the strategic moves she made to get into the royal family, the entire story changes. The palace is frozen right now. What's coming is clear to them. Andrew's angry enough to actually do it. Controlling him isn't possible anymore because because there's nothing left to threaten him with. Harry's coming apart, dealing with the realization that everything he gave up might have been for something that wasn't what he thought it was. And Meghan panicking because she didn't just marry into the royal family like the world believes. She strategically positioned herself to get there, targeted Andrew first. When that didn't work, she pivoted to Harry, played the game better than anyone realized until now, until the people who saw it happening decided they're done.
Potentially, this could be the most serious legal trouble the rogue royal has found himself in. So much
staying quiet. The real question isn't if this comes out anymore, it's when. When will Andrew decide he's ready to burn it all down? When will Fergie stop protecting the institution that threw her ex-husband away? When will someone finally say what everyone behind closed doors already knows? Because that moment's coming. The whole story rewrites itself in real time. The fairy tale everyone watched collapses. The narrative the palace built around Meghan falls apart. And what's been sitting in the shadows finally steps into the light. This story isn't over, it's just getting started. And what happens next? That depends entirely on the man with nothing left who decides he's done protecting everyone else's secrets, who chooses to tell his side, who believes the world deserves to know what really happened before any of this became the story we've all been watching. If this opened your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with your thoughts. I'll catch you in the next one.